Hello dabblers of the internet, JB here with an overview of my now finished Goblin army. So if you're interested in me review these units, talk about these units, and generally show off what I've just done, then watch on. So here it is, just over 2,300 points of Goblins for Kings of War. All multi-based up, and I think you've seen a few different units in various stages of progression. We've got the Trolls there, we've got the multi-based Goblin Hordes, and I think some of the other smaller units over there. But what I'm going to do is go through each of my single units together, showing off what they look like, talking about what I think of them, and then maybe talking at the end about what I'd like to add, and a kind of overview of the Goblin army in general. This is very similar to a video I did a long time ago with my Forces of the Abyss, which was my first Kings of War army. So let's crack on. Let's start off from left to right, starting with the very simple, the Goblin Rabble. So you can see here, there we go, focusing nicely. I wanted to do hordes, even though knowing that Goblin regiments, so Rabble regiments, are really the most value way to go, and obviously you can chuck them together to make a horde, because the two regiments make a horde, and so I could have just made 4 regiments with the added flexibility. But the problem is, when you go for regiments, you just don't get this wonderful multi-basing opportunity, mainly including these little huts that I've got here. These are from a fairy tale diorama sets sold at the Australian store Spotlight, which is like a arts and crafts kind of store, and they're just these. I assume people make them for fairy tale dioramas, and so they're not incredibly detailed. You can see some nice mold lines going on the top. I couldn't be bothered trying to fix them, but they're really cool, especially when you repaint them. So they come in all like hot pink and bright colors, and very cutesy. But I obviously repainted, put them into the base, did a nice zenithal highlight, and then just painted them with all kinds of stuff. So I think generally everyone likes this base more here, rather than my tree trunk base, but they're both pretty good. So yeah, it's with the Horde that you have the ability to do some awesome multi-basing stuff, which really is what sells the Kings of War hobby for many people, is this ability to make these scenes. It also means you don't have to quite put as many models on there. You don't have to go full model count, because you've taken up a lot of space with this, and then we've got a little garden fence there. I would like to add a few more goblins. I think I got to this point, it's just how many I had painted at the time, and I was pressed for time because I was trying to get ready for a tournament. But I think it looks reasonably full. And so what I've gone for is the basing scheme is kind of making from the Velen level in Witcher 3, where we've got the Crookback Bog, and so I was just trying to go for that kind of feel where you've got bits of greenery interspersed with bog, just watery puddles that you don't really know what's in. And so just having my goblins in that kind of environment worked, and it meant with the goblins I didn't actually have to paint them in any bright colour, so they've just got kind of drab browns, letting the skin really be the popping. And then having some nice popping with the toadstools, with all the little red white dots on the red. Yeah, they were really fun, and you can see all my goblins pretty much from all kinds of ranges. You've got the Mantic Goblins, we've got the little Night Goblins from, well, that's from the Sprue, and then you've got other ones that are actually from straight up the starter set. Speaking of starter set, we have the old, I think 4th edition Goblins there, in their static pose. So yeah, these are just an eclectic mix that's just showing off all the goblins that you can get, and yeah, I had some Mantic Goblins as well, which are actually really good. They stand out. They're so much better than these old goblin kits. But just put them all together, paint them all brown, which is nice, easy to tie it all together, because some have robes, some have armor, and it starts to get pretty difficult. Yeah, and then I put in these just these are all woodland scenic trees that you can just kind of twist into any shape you like, and I just don't put anything on them to keep them looking creepy. So there's not much to say about the Rabble regiments and hordes. Well, I can only talk about the hordes for now. They're just good for unlocks. They get the army started. They get in the way. Only 125 points. It's just amazing value. Don't really expect them to do anything, of course. I mean, I've even had opportunities where I've gotten to charge into a rear, and they still did nothing, and I just used up more of the clock rolling all those dice, because triple attacks is 75 dice to roll, and I think I ended up doing like 3 damage in the end to a defense 5 units, so not much point in that. So perhaps if you get those kinds of opportunities with Rabble, just turn it down and stick to the scenario. So yeah, these are what I'm really proud of, and these really sell the theme of the army. But I do have a few other notable units that help sell the theme of this swamp living goblins. Not much more to say about Rabble. So let's move on to down here, my only Luggits for now. So here they are, little Luggit troop. Obviously these are fanatics with a mop-up, just to help get them to that at least minimum model count. It's really hard to pack any more fanatics really in, and especially I've got this one old metal fanatic that actually doesn't take up much space. So when I've just got these 4 actual plastic fanatics, not the most modern ones anymore. They released the new kit, but I don't care for the price of that kit. So yeah, it was good. And so the troop was just really a way of filling in the points. They're only just 110, so they're nice and cheap. I usually put the skirmishers boots on them, make them nimble. And you can even put a mop-up on them, and then they really quite pack a punch. They have 15 attacks, so they're only 5 less attacks than the regiment, which is standard for your kind of berserker type units. So I think they're really good value, and their only problem is it's just they're very easy to get rid of because they're defense 4 and only I think dash 11, so it's quite easy to just shoot them off. But even if they're the regiment size, they're pretty easy to shoot off. So usually you have to protect them a bit. So they're usually the second wave or even third wave. But yeah, I also just needed some more models because I think previously I was working on other lists that were using some more heroes, so, individuals and stuff, and I was finding the individuals were just not working because obviously they're not scoring, and they have all the problems that individuals have, like encouraging overrun into your other units, and yeah, things were just not working with having too many individuals in the army. So it was these that I created, I think, in the last week before I had to go to Convic, the tournament in question. And I was just scrambling to put them together. Obviously you can see that these were stuck onto kinds of bases, and with the way the fanatics are, there's a very minimal contact point for something that really goes in all directions, and I did not want to cut them off and then try and use super glue to have each one down. So I did my patented approach, which I do in lots of cases when I'm too lazy, which is just integrate the base in permanently. So under these, you can kind of see where they might be. The round bases are hidden under there. I use round bases because, I don't mind using up round bases. I'll never need round bases, so just chuck them in there, embed them, cover it in rocks and stuff, and you won't even know they're there. So that's the approach I went for these guys. And yeah, same basing scheme. To make the swamp, very simple. You just keep glazing it up, and you get some kind of depth beneath this, and it gets that sheen, that nice look, because bogs aren't actually that deep. It doesn't need any water effects to work, and I didn't have time for that because this was all about speed, getting this army done. On to trolls. So yeah, Luggits. I would like to, I should say a few more things. I would like to get a regiment of Luggits. I'd like to try that horde of Luggits even. But that just, I do have more fanatics for definitely making up a regiment together with this one, but I don't think I have enough for a horde. And I'm not sure if I want to go down that route because it is just one unit you can have as a horde, and I don't know if it's really worth it. In the end, it's a lot of points, and if you start spending too many points on any single unit in Goblins, usually things can go wrong. So not sure if I'm sold on it just yet. Something that I've had a bit of a tumultuous relationship with is my troll units. I really love them, so I just had lots of trolls already because you get, I had a whole bunch of I had a whole bunch of Games Workshop trolls, particularly these, I think they're stone trolls. Yes, these ones from Battle for Skull Pass. That's the OG one, and then you can see all other kinds of ones that I've also included, but in an effort to reduce repeating their face, and also some had been previously converted to be Chaos Trolls with very shoddy conversions using, the spare heads from, say, the Demon Prince kit from Games Workshop. I then took the spare heads I had from the Troll kit, the new one, the Troggoth kit, these guys, and just stuck them on. So that's what that one looks like, and you can see some here, these guys. But the best part about them, I did again my patented approach, so you can see that here, of integrating the base. Because these guys, the way they come in the Battle for Skull Pass set is that they have a special base for themselves, and the way they glue into it means that the foot really fuses with the base, with the plastic glue. So this was my only attempt, this guy here, the yellow one, at getting one off. He just snapped. I didn't even get far. So yeah, that's why he's kind of wading in the water. And so then I stopped trying to do that and just integrated each one has at least one of those stone trolls integrated to the base, and what they do is they form a really good pickup point. So they're not coming off. It's under it's super glued to the base, and then under piles of PVA and stuff, just holding it in there. So that's never coming off. So I can always grab it by those nice stone trolls. So that's my anchor point, which is always important. You know, I got that here. I can grab these, and for them, I can grab the actual trolls. But I do have a variety of other trolls. We've got the mantic trolls, and we have the old metal stone trolls, so you can see those here, and the new troggoths. So it's a nice mix of multiple generations and manufacturers, and again, the same basing kind of approach. Pretty proud of it. Looks pretty good. Nothing fancy on these ones. There's not really much room, especially I did want to push up to 5 trolls. I had the trolls, so why not? The only reason on this one it's just the 4 is because there's really that little space in between here. It's not really that much for a troll. I think I could fit in one if I had another one of these kind, or maybe one more mantic troll, which I might one day, but I don't really mind not having that many. And I probably, so originally the list I was working, this whole thing is the list I was working for, trying to work towards. These are not probably going to be featuring 3 ever again. So I was playing a lot, 3 trolls, and supporting that. That was the core of the army, because they're crushing 2, they're really cheap, but they hit on 4s, and that's really just what brings them down. Is they're hitting on 4s with only 18 attacks means that you're getting 9 hits, and once you're down to 9 hits, then yeah, you really start to struggle getting anything that will rout any particular unit. So you always have to make sure you double charge, but it's always difficult to get that. It was always difficult to get that kind of double charge with 2 of these hordes at once. Especially my playstyle with having these, which are, this would be the first wave, and then these guys will come next. You can see my battle reports, you'll see how it works. But yeah, the trolls were always struggling to really deal out the damage that I needed, and they were some of the main damage dealers. They could also take a hit, but the problem is that 14 waver was always holding them back. And so having these form the core of my army meant that I had a relatively, it was a sturdy base, but also randomly fragile, and I was using Headstrong to kind of mitigate that, but the amount of times the Headstrong fails when you just need it was very frustrating. So not sure if I'd ever go 3, probably 2 or 1 with the detonation packs. The det packs seem like really fun. It's a free upgrade and makes them explode when they die, and explode within 6 inches rather than just what's in contact, say like with the pendant of Retribution. So it's a really neat thing, but you just got to make sure it's not really near much of your army, otherwise you'll definitely do damage. But no, I don't mind trolls, and I've made a good job of them, but I think this is as far as the trolls will go. I won't be ever making any more hordes. I do wish I had now made regiments, because then I could use them for ambush, but I think that's too late for that now. So yeah, unfortunately this army really isn't good for playing ambush, because yeah, you've got hordes here, so there's a lot I can't use, but at least I have a troop here. So let's go on to the star of the show, at least in terms of in every battle they were doing the most damage, and that's these FLEABAG regiments that would be part of a formation, so they would be the bang sticks, which really doesn't need too much explanation here. You can take a look at all my battle reports where I've used them, but they are the main damage dealers just because they in the formation end up with Elite and Vicious and Thunderous too, so you don't need to say much more than that just to know how powerful that is. And then they get some extra hits on 6s. They would hurt themselves, but in general they would always at least delete 1 unit, and since they're speed 10 nimble, it's not hard to try and pinpoint and get that 1 unit. They're very easy to take off, only 14, 16 nerve, but not even 14, no, 13, 15, but yeah, they're always quality, so they'll always be in a formation in my army lists. And so yeah, what I've got here, these are the Forest Spiders from our good old Games Workshop first, Battle for Skull Pass, I think it was, yeah. That starter kit for 7th edition with the dwarves, and so they're fun miniatures. Some of them actually might be from the sprue that they then came out with the multi-part kit, where the spider actually stayed completely the same, which is unfortunate. It gets a bit annoying, repeating it, but it did have some multi-pose goblins, which just made it a bit more interesting. So yeah, they're climbing around these kind of canyons, these gullies. Because yeah, I was looking at these spiders, and I've seen multi-base before just on flat surface, and they really look quite static and boring because they are so similar. And so the only way to really make them feel more spider-like is to, I've seen people convert them so that their legs are more open, which requires lots of green stuffing and snipping, and it just looked far too tedious, especially for my kind of speed project that I was after. So then I thought, well, why not try and get the three-dimensionality into the project, and so that was then requiring sculpting some gullies using some, this is just foam, you can see the front size, just cut foam where I've just cut it and chipped away at it to get the shapes I wanted, and then just covered it in layers of grit and sand, and I think I actually used snow because it's nice and fine, the snow effect from Woodland Scenics, and then obviously did my patented bog effect. I got some little resin bits in there that I got for my birthday last year, which just 3D print resin stuff of just, you know, miscellaneous bones, so just kind of adds to the grim aspect. Got little tree stumps, and yeah, just put in the trees. I snapped these trees into, I cut them into smaller bits, so that's just this one tree cut into pieces and spread out along here because I just didn't want it sticking up too far. I also find myself kind of stabbing myself with them, and I wanted room for all my spiders, so yeah, I think it's a pretty good look. You've got 8 spiders and 8 spiders on each one, so it's, you know, it's a preferred model count. It's pretty cool, and I have them, you know, one with the banner up, which is if I ever have an upgrade like Sir Jesse's Boots of Striding, this unit has it. I just say the one with the banner at the top, and this one's got the banner bearer down in the gully. So yeah, fantastic units. Always going to use them, so I'm pretty pleased that I put in the effort to make them look good. Because if there's anything that always makes me not want to make certain lists, it's sometimes because I've just made a not very good paint job, or I haven't really based it very much. So yeah, I'm always just like, you know, I don't want to use it, but this encourages me to use it, and so do the Rebel Hordes. I want to use them every single time, even though it might not be optimal, but what are you going to do? So here, then I've just got, I'm not sure why I'm showing them off, but you know, they come with a Goblin kit, so why not make little tokens? I've seen people using various different tokens, like such as the throwing dogs, and they get some little mastiffs on bases, and so I thought, yeah, it's good to show that kind of stuff. It helps remind me that I have them, and it's useful for the opponent to know as well before they go chucking into them. But generally they don't get a choice when it comes to the Bang 6. They'll pick their target. But yeah, definitely a fantastic unit. I don't think you'll find any Goblin player that would poo-poo using these, and they've perfectly fit the whole Goblin idea of doing lots of damage and taking lots of damage. So yeah, very rarely do they survive the entire game, and so that's why I've got to kind of change up my lists a bit, because they would essentially be not unit strength. Like you look at your end of your army list and it says, oh, you have 25 unit strength, and you think, oh, fantastic. I'm definitely got scenarios in the bag, but you really have to deduct this, the 6 unit strength 3 and 3. You should deduct that from your calculations, because they definitely won't be there at the end. And so then also, if you're using your hordes as chaff, really all that's left are trolls to be your scoring units right at the end. And so that's what led me to then change up my lists a bit more to get some more unit strength in there, such as the Luggits and also the Winggits and the Blaster. So let's move on to those. So let's go with the Blaster. So this was also a late addition, as I was changing out heroes and individuals and starting to put in more unit strength. The Blaster is a key unit to the Goblin army that everyone recommends, because it just poses so much threat. It itself is not actually that fantastic, because it is equally likely to do nothing as it is to absolutely decimate a unit, but it's that threat of being able to do everything. Obviously I do like the Mantic model, but like with a lot of my Goblin projects, it was all trying to take things that I just had lying in the cupboard and creating an army from them. And that can be fun by itself because it's quite limiting, and so I wanted to make a Blaster using the corpse cart, because I had a corpse cart. You know, it's the classic Vampire Counts corpse cart, but I didn't have anything to push it. For whatever reason, this second-hand corpse cart didn't come with the original zombies on it, and I wouldn't want them anyway, because that's definitely undead. A pile of corpses is just a pile of, it's just that. So I did have some poorly converted ogres that were once someone's base Blood Bowl team, for an ogre Blood Bowl team, years and years ago. So there they are. So they'd had they had all their hand weapons taken off, and so what I did, their faces were poorly painted, and it was hard to get that paint off. So what I did was I scrubbed their faces off and put on these gongs that come from the musicians for the Night Goblins. This was inspired by one of the ladies of the bog, who has a basket face and looks absolutely horrifying. And so I thought, yeah, I'm going to do that. So you can see I put a little bit of blood, and it made it look a little bit inflamed with a bit of just a bit more red and tinge, just to make it look like, stitched on abomination, poor ogres being forced to push this blaster, which itself is just it's like a mushroom factory. So I just clipped off, so just like you see all those mushrooms on top of that banner, I found all my spare bits in my bits box that contained mushrooms on them and clipped those mushrooms off. And I was just getting as many mushrooms and then finding as many places to glue them onto this model as possible. And then, I just decided to paint them with like yellow with a little purple kind of like flourish, garnish? No, edging? Yeah, edging, there we go. And then obviously painting the corpses was just a whole bunch of glazes, quite fun. And wherever the mushrooms are coming out, I made it look a bit yellow, just to show maybe the hyphae that extend from the mushrooms, which are kind of like mushroom roots, into the mushrooms itself. And put the little goblin shaman that I had, because I didn't really want to use him as a whiz. He's kind of just a very average model, but he goes perfect on the end of this, so that just really sells it as a goblin blaster. And so yeah, that's it. It's just, it very rarely ever gets to combat in my battles, but it's always getting shot off, and that's fine because it's so cheap, and it actually is not that easy to shoot off being defense 5. So it was a perfect inclusion in my army, and yeah, sells the theme a bit further about how grim these goblins are. Alright, then we have the big rocks throwers. These are pretty good. They can, just like everyone says about war engines, they either do the whole everything, they'll take out a unit, they'll scare your opponent, or they'll do nothing and the opponent eventually wakes up to the fact that they're completely useless. So these are two different big rock throwers. This one's obviously the very first catapult for the Orcs and Goblins, I think 4th edition or 3rd edition. It was in the original box, probably could have sold for a little bit or nothing, something you can never really be sure. So I just decided to take it out and paint it, and it was really fun to paint, and I just kind of made it look a bit more grim than the bright red that they had. And then here is the next generation of Rocklobber. Was the one from, I'd say 6th edition, when they were trying to make them look a bit more gritty, and so that's what it looks like. It's a bit more of just ramshackle rather than this one just looks like an evil catapult. And the crew is really fun. It's a fun kind of crew there, the metal models. But many years ago, I think the stone fell off. It was always a thing that fell off the kit anyway. It was a heavy metal stone. So instead, this is actually a part of the troll kit. It was something that one of the trolls could hold up, the Troggoth kit. And so I just shaved it of anything that didn't quite fit, and then put a hook there, and yeah, it's kind of glued there. It also falls off, but since it's made of plastic, it's far easier to glue back on. These are great. I have them in many lists, but also taking them out of list means I open up quite a few points, 180 points. But including them isn't bad. They just don't contribute to the scenario whatsoever, but they do contribute to the general anxiety of my opponent. So I don't mind having them in. And it's always an and ah trying to be like, I could have this, or I could have a blaster and a LUGGIT. Which one? And it's hard to say which is more important. But I'm very proud of the basics. So you might notice here, on this one which has wheels, I tried to dig into the ground there, using just furrowing into my paste of grit that I was putting down, to show that these were wheeled up. So this one also has to be, you can't quite see maybe on that angle, to show that they're really pushing through the mud, because this is a big heavy catapult. So I just want that look. Don't know how many people saw that, but I had fun thinking of how that would look, because it doesn't just exist in the bog, it has to get pushed there. And if it's getting pushed through a bog, chances are it's leaving a nice wet trail. Whereas this, I don't know how this gets moved around. I assume they just get some trolls to come pick it up. So now let's move on to some of the more nimble things. So we have my WINGGITs. So WINGGITs are also, I can think most Goblin players would agree, quite the must. Whether you like it's been split into the two versions, the Bombs Away variant, or the, what's the other one? Ramming Speed variant, which is the combat kind. They're both pretty good. I made mine originally based on the first WINGGIT, which was the Bombs Away one, which was... Anyway, I made it before they came up with the Clash of Kings division, so you can't really get around the speeder. I suppose he could, but he should look a bit more combat-like. But you can see they both got bows, they both got arrows with a little flame on them to show that they're shooting these kind of flaming arrows that are, I suppose, supposed to be explosive, because that's what they do, they throw bombs. And you can see this little snotling, or... there's not really a snotling, but a small goblin providing potions and encouragement and generally demeaning the opponent. And so this is a 3D printed crow that I got. Oh, yeah, you can see a video where I was converting these up, trying to make them, and then I just put them on my classic basing scheme to make them look quite similar to the rest of the army. And yeah, I went for crows. I could have got the actual WINGGIT, but it just seemed a bit too mechanical for my bog goblins, and so I wanted instead these crows because I thought they looked pretty grim, and they're fun models. Nothing wrong with the actual WINGGIT model, but yeah, crows, and it works. And I just see the Goblin Wolf Rider riders, which are far too big. The Goblin Wolf Rider models just look ridiculous, and so that's why I went for the spider ones, because it looks a bit more in proportion. Whereas these guys have got giant feet. It's back when Games Workshop didn't quite know how to do the ends of limbs. They're just like giant hands, giant feet, giant head, just way too comical, and in a very silly way. So yeah, WINGGITs, fantastic. They support the war engines thanks to the Eye in the Sky rule, but really most of the time I eventually learned that I just couldn't try and use them as either a range unit or as a War Machine support unit. Really, that would only happen randomly, like if it just the opportunity arose, but really I had to make sure I used them either as chaff to protect, say, the bang sticks, or I was using them purely for scoring. Like, I see that token, it's in a corner, these guys go in that corner, they stay in that corner. And so that's when they've worked the best, is when I remember to do that. They tend to be the worst when I tend to put them into situations they shouldn't be in, such as trying to get ranged attacks on something silly when really that has very little chance of affecting the game, or when I'm chasing after. Yeah, it's best if you keep your mind on the scenario when it comes to using these things, and anything else is a bonus. So onto the individuals that I was always thinking of, yes, putting in or no, they were kind of in and out. We have here a Wiz, which is just kind of a hag model from D&D range, so it just comes on this kind of rock base, and so I didn't really do much, just made it look like she was on a bog, and painted her like my goblins. And I like the hag, like I say, it's like the hags from The Witcher 3. It's just kind of matches the whole thing, but I made it look more goblin-y, and that was fun. That was a kind of a Wiz is so cheap, it comes with a lightning bolt, and it can work with GROANY SNARK previously with the Host Shadow Beast, and it also has the access to all kinds of spells, maybe put in Scorched Earth or something. But yeah, it was just always... it was not quite working. It doesn't have Inspiring, so it doesn't really synergize with the rest of the army much. The little 3 lightning bolts fine, but you don't really need it. You can go without. So she was always kind of in and out of the lists, and so yeah, maybe she'll go in some more. I mean, nothing wrong with a good caster, especially a cheap one like the Goblins have. Maybe I just need more of them. Maybe you just need 3 Wizzes, all cheap, just with a lightning bolt, just pumping out shots. Then here we have the BANGGIT, which is a model from the Squig kit, I think, from Games Workshop. So it's just playing these little kind of fungus bagpipes. I thought that was pretty good as a BANGGIT, just playing music. And then I just thought I'd put it on this. This is actually my first attempt at making bases from that foam that then formed part of the bang sticks. So I was quite happy how this kind of turned out, a bit too blocky and flat, but it was my first time, and I wanted to make him look a little bit more imposing than he was, because he looked very diminutive on his small base. So I just wanted him to stand out a bit more. The BANGGIT's fine. Does damage, gets in the way, kind of, but it's just another point sink that, when it was like I'd have these two and I'd have the 2 war machines, and before you're almost spending like 350 points on things that don't actually contribute to the scenario. So that's where things had to change up, where at least these 2 would be taken out and replaced with others, and that was a key for a lot of things. But it's very easy to accumulate all these cool little characters because they all have fun little rules, especially the BANGGIT is quite fun, and so are some other ones that I'll show. So we're getting finally to the full array of, I guess, the characters that are on offer for the goblins. There's a few more that I haven't included here, but we'll start off with my Goblin King usually. He's playing Goblin King, and it's a very cool plastic kit from Games Workshop for the new Gloomspite kits. I mean, it's awesome. Look at that kit. It's got everything's as finely detailed as you expect for these quite expensive plastic single model kits. Obviously, he came in the Start Collecting box. I don't know if they're going to exist anymore, but yeah, he's a fantastic goblin. He's in armor. He looks the part, and I think I painted him up quite nicely. But yeah, he's a support piece really in the goblins. You're not going to use him for his combat prowess, as he is. If you upgrade him to GROANY SNARK, obviously that changes, but that's a different model I have. But I would always have him with the Jarrett's Pendant because it gives Headstrong. It's pretty cool. Sacred Horn, but that puts him up to 100 points. But that means he can then babysit the trolls. Hence, I would say I would fail my Headstrong roll because, yeah, he was the originator of that Headstrong roll. So maybe instead, when you have 3, it gets hard about how you try and mitigate their wavering, because you have one item that gives Fury, one item that gives Headstrong, and then maybe the Staying Stone. And at that point, it's better to just have the Goblin King. But instead, what you could have, if you only have 2 or 1, then you don't have to worry about that. Then you can just have the Fury item on 1, and you don't need the Goblin King, which is sad because he's a great model, but that's how things work. So I'm definitely keen on seeing what happens if I remove him, or when I don't need to have him babysitting trolls, so I can have something else, because 100 points, quite a lot. It's almost a HORDE RABBLE. And he's not scoring, but he is good in that he has little short bows. Never forget about the short bows that the kings have, because as you accumulate them, it's quite a few shots, and they're hitting on range 4+, so nothing to sneeze at or forget about, and they do accumulate over time, especially killing chaff. On to my Troll Bruiser. So this is the Throg model from, I don't think he's made anymore, but he is resin, made by Forge World, I think. No, maybe it wasn't made by Forge World. No, it was Games Workshop, and yeah, he was in the Warriors of Chaos book, at least the latest one. I only played Warriors of Chaos in 8th edition, and I really liked Throg because he had this cool ability. Anyway, doesn't really matter. He could mutate a lot. Now he plays a Troll Bruiser, who doesn't have as cool rules, but he's actually just a really cool unit to have, and I'll probably have to get another Troll Bruiser because he's one of those nimble scoring, speed 6 kind of, just gets around. He can score, he can definitely chip into fights because he's melee 3, crushing 2, only 5 attacks, but he'll always be doing at least about 1 or 2 damage, and he's cheap. Obviously he still has the same problem of the big wavering route gap that all trolls suffer from, so he's 12-15, so he does have the unfortunate chance of just kind of standing around doing nothing, but I guess that's the charm of the trolls. But once I started using him, he was one of my first changes, was put in the Troll Bruiser and take out some of the others, these units, like the individuals, and then things started working a bit better because he could also just, run off with a token. He wasn't essential to the whole game plan. He's cheap enough that he could sit on a token like the WINGGITs, but he's also strong enough that, unlike the WINGGITs, he could go up ahead, grab a token first, and then back away, because usually an opponent would not want to charge just the Troll Bruiser because not far behind him would be the rest of the army. So he was always really good, and he's speed 6, so he can actually, in the first turn, jump up and get something on the midline. So very useful indeed. Probably need another one. Problem is, I won't get another Throg because I think he's very expensive now. He's hard to get, and I'm not sure what kind of troll could, match his stature. I could try and get a single one of these trolls, perhaps, or maybe we'll get the Mantic Troll Bruiser. That's not a bad model. He's a bit shorter, but definitely looks pretty cool. He's kind of holding his club over his shoulder and pointing. So maybe that's what I'll do. On to the next one, and he's the weirdest individual you can probably get, is this guy. So this is Magwa and Joe's, which is supposed to be like Scar, Snick, and Gobbler. So, you got, I think Joe's is the Goblin, and Magwa is the giant beast, of whatever you like. I think it's supposed to be like a big Moor beast, but I've got an owlbear, because I bought an owlbear a long time ago thinking I might make my own Gloomspite Gits kind of, riding squig. But I never really got into Age of Sigmar Goblins, and so it sat around until, this unit appeared and I was making goblins, and I was like, hey, this works. And it just fits on the base with a goblin underneath it. So there we are, we've got it. And so the owlbear gets used. It's an awesome, awesome little centerpiece model. I really like it, and I put a lot of effort into painting individual feathers, geez. But what I found, he's actually a really good individual. People always forget he's an individual. I mean, I do try and remind them, but it is something they forget because, yeah, he can just charge in any direction despite his large cavalry base size. So he can charge in any direction, but he doesn't triple attacks, which is the downside. But he also, at the same time, people don't get multiple attacks against him. But he is expensive because he has so many special rules. He really will always do a lot of damage in combat, like, you know, at least 2 or 3, maybe 4. Which is not a lot of damage, but it's a lot of damage for an individual, that's for sure, especially goblin individuals. And he's also he's inspiring, unlike some of the other special characters, which is a little bit annoying. But yeah, since he's an individual, he's not scoring, so he doesn't contribute to the game plan at the end. And being so expensive as an individual means that yeah, it's kind of a I'm compromising by putting him in. And he usually wants to get out by himself because he's got wild charge. He goes off on his own. So you do have to hold him back for a bit, but at least he has lightning bolt, which means that he's contributing to the battle even if he's not going out there by himself. So yeah, again, this is another model from the Squig kit, you know, one of the Squig handlers, and with that amazing kind of armor, he really looks quite grim. Unfortunately, I didn't take him to Convict because, yeah, like I said, I was starting to focus more on scoring units, and he's definitely not scoring, and he's expensive. But you know, if just for fun, he's perfect in there. And he's duelist, so you got to watch out. He'll surprisingly just go out and take out someone else's individual. But yeah, it's a luxury item in a goblin army. Put him back. So then the next individual that I really love taking all the time is GRUPP. I like taking GRUPP. This is the actual GRUPP model. GRUPP LONGNAIL comes in the starter kit, but I think you can get it by himself as well. The old starter kit, so that's the War in the Holds. And yeah, I got a bit better at making these kinds of bases, so it looks a bit more like he's actually on a rock, and I've made it a bit angled, so he kind of accentuates his cool Kamehameha pose, which is awesome. And obviously I gave it a nice blue glow in his gloves. So even though he's a spellcaster, he's got spellcaster 0, he doesn't have any spells, which is strange. You would think he's more of a wizard, but no, he's a combat character, and an exceptional one at that. Only 4 attacks, but he has Blast D3 on each of his hits, which is just really nasty. And he's pretty much one of the only things that is melee 3+ in the army. The only other things that are melee 3+ are the Bruiser and the Magwa and Joes. Everything else is melee 4+. Or maybe the Blaster is melee 3+. But yeah, melee 3+, very rare in Goblins. Only really in the upper echelons do you see it. Real upper echelons, not even the King. So he's great. He's always going to do that damage, even with his 4 attacks, because only 1 has to get through. Unfortunately, he does have Crushing 1, so on higher defense targets, he might struggle to get that damage through. But often you're not sending him by himself. He's contributing to combats, and he has a really great ability that when he does deal damage, his magical gloves bestow Fulgur, which just kind of it gives weakness to the enemy. It just goes boom, you're not doing as much damage, and so he's perfect for just chucking into a combat and saying, oh well, now you're going to really be stuck. And I think I've said this many times, like the best times I've ever used him is against cavalry that have Thunderous 2. Not only does he disorder them, but then he also will put them at -1 damage, and so they really then struggle to do damage to him or anything else in the subsequent phase. So pretty nasty. And he has Ensnare, probably due to his gloves as well, which means you'll be hitting him at -1 again. So -1 to hit, -1 to damage. Whew, he's great, and he's only 90 points, so it's very hard to say no to him. He's nearly all my lists, and he's a duelist. So the only downside is he is not inspiring, so he does not help contribute to the army whatsoever in terms of the defensive aspect, but he's very good in terms of the tar pitting of units. But yeah, he doesn't contribute to the battle line much apart from his combat prowess. But yeah, another unit that's all about combat prowess, but at least has inspiring, is GROANY SNARK. So that's an upgrade for the king. And he's supposed to be a flying goblin that goes around in a WINGGIT suit and just plows into them. There's no actual model because it's just a unique upgrade. And people have done all kinds of They usually get the Doom Diver Goblin, or they will also get maybe an Edge Grenadiers model and give it a Goblin head. Very cool. But I have this Forest Goblin Shaman that goes in the Arachnarok Spider lying around. I don't know how I got it. I think I just got it in a bulk lot of bits a long time ago. And I was always thinking maybe one day I'll actually use him as a Goblin Shaman. But, as I was getting into this army and this was not the way I wanted my wizards to look, I decided that maybe he looks like he can fly, with his webbing. So I drilled into his butt and put in this acrylic rod, and now he can fly. And I gave him a giant club because he's supposed to be really bashing, and he had a little wand thing. And so I took River Troll club, because I also have some random River Troll arms, and just glued it there. It took a while to take hold, but eventually we got there. And it's got this giant Thunderous 2, Crushing 1. It really looks like he'll do a lot of damage with it, and he is fantastic. It's a great, even after losing her Shadow Beast, which I tried not to use. One of my friends, Mike Crossman, said, you shouldn't rely on that as a crutch. And I'm like, I'm not a great player, I need crutches. But, against my better judgment, I ended up listening to him and not using Host Shadow Beast for the brief window in which it was available. And so he had to go around with his original profile. But you know what? He still managed to do ridiculous amounts of damage. Like, I think the best in Convict was 9 damage to Frostfang. That was the final battle. And that pretty much put the Frostfang into the grave, because then after that they were very easy to take off with my war engines. So yeah, he's always a threat. He's always flying around. He's very easy to get out of situations. The main thing I need to do with him is when he gets into a combat and he doesn't immediately kill something and then they're about to hit him back, I should just leave that combat in the next round, because sometimes I'll just stick there and be like, well, I'm here, I might as well just keep fighting. But since he's still at speed 10 and he's an individual, he can still very easily get out of that fight and just disappear. So that's what I should do, is just get away, and usually most individuals can't chase him, so he gets away, has a breather, doing nothing for a turn, and then he's ready to go jump into something full strength again. So that's a little advice if you're using Groaning Snark, is don't get him stuck in combat, because his Crushing 1, melee 4+, is useless. And the final, the Fleabag Rider, or King on Fleabag, I should say, is part of the formation. So you go with the Bang Sticks, it makes up the Bang Sticks, and yeah, he's just the Goblin Spider Rider, I think from the actual kit, where you could give it some upgrade limbs. So he just looks a bit more powerful. He's got a little back banner thing. It's a cool model, and so definitely looks like more kingly than your standard Goblin Spider Rider, and matches them. And yeah, it's just he's good. He's been known to do some damage. He has all the same special upgrades apart from Thunderous 2 that the actual Goblins have. There we go. Let's see what better. Nothing too crazy. He's really just a support piece. But he also comes at 100 points. So you can see once you start chucking in all these individuals, such as that King and Granny Snark and Grupp and this guy, you're spending a lot of points on dudes that don't contribute to the overall battle. And that is the trap with the Goblins, is that you just start chucking in all these things that aren't helping, like, then you have the war engines. And before you know it, maybe, I think in one list, I was close to half the army was not scoring in terms of points. And I mean, obviously, Goblins are cheap, so it's not hard to have the rest of the army be scoring and useful. But it's a dangerous spot to be in, because then you've just got all these things that aren't scoring, and everything else isn't elite enough to live that long. So yeah, it's tempting to go in all with these things, and you've got other temptations like Kuzlo and Madfall as well, who at least scores. But yeah, that's the danger of the Goblins, is it's very easy to just go in, and there's even more things, like there's this Stinger who's like an actual assassin, and then you've got, obviously you could go Wiz as heavy as well, and maybe I will, but for now this is the Goblin army. I'm pretty happy with how it works. It's just, when everything's hitting on 4s, it can be quite discouraging when it all doesn't work, especially the trolls. So that's why I'm keen to change things up and go for Detonation Pack trolls maybe, or just less trolls. And so some of the units that I want to introduce are like the Mincer mobs. So I do have some Mincers actually, so I will be introducing a mince mob regiment, which, you know, that's just going to be perfect. They're really good because not only do they have a huge amount of attacks, but they're also fearless, so they don't suffer from the trolls do. They are thunderous one, crushing one, so they may not hit as hard all the time, but by being fearless, they're going to be doing more throughout the game, and they've got big shields, so they're not as easy to take out from the front. I also have loads more goblins, so I can actually make some regiments of rabble. So maybe I'll make 2 or 3 regiments of rabble. I also have spitters. I have so many bowmen because, you know, you usually come away with all these old goblin kits with equal parts bowmen as you would spearmen. So I can make spitter regiments, spitter hordes. They're not very good, but, you know, one day I'll make them. But for now, I won't jump into it. I do want some more kinds of chaff, like actual the classic chaff. So, you know, because WINGGIT's throwing them away is not always the best. So I'm thinking of, I've got some I've got wolf riders with bows, so I'll probably like make FLEABAG rider sniffs. I've got wolf riders with spears, so I can make FLEABAG riders, just, you know, troops of them. So that's, you know, chaff right there. So there's other kits that I want to put together. Maybe I'll add a giant one day, but I'm already working on a giant model for my Trident Realms army, so not sure how many times I want to be working with the same kit. But yeah, I probably will eventually get more Mincer mobs, because the Mincer mob I've got is like just the original Mincer mob model, which I think is it's already put together because it's second hand, but it's, you know, it looks alright. But then now they've come out with the new Chariots kit that also makes the Mincer mob. I don't think I'd ever actually put together the Chariots, even though I like the look of them, just because the Chariots for goblins aren't that great. I once ran a chariot horde using my Arachnarok spider, and it wasn't chariot, it was like a legion. Anyway, it was quite lackluster. But yes, speaking of the Arachnarok spider, I would like to put that on a 75mm somehow. I think I'll have to make a base that kind of expands from the bottom using this foam, so kind of making it coming up in a kind of a rhomboid, and not rhomboid, trapezium, and then stick it on top like that, like on a pedestal. So that's probably how I'll have to, and then use that as a Goblin Slasher, because the Goblin Slasher now has some cool upgrades. You know, he's got the war trombones. I want to add war trombones. They're not scoring, but they're so cheap and amazing. I think I have to get them, and those I'll probably get from Mantic, because, you know, the model's pretty fun, and for something that is so powerful in game, sometimes it's a bit cheap just making your own crappy one just from bits. I feel like some things do warrant you showing the investment, because, you know, otherwise it's, you know, it's just means here's this amazing thing that I can make so many of because I figured out a really cheap way to do it. So I will try and get them. I'll probably just get 2 of those. I won't go nuts, because yeah, 2's probably enough when it comes to war engines. But if I get those, you know, I could maybe lean into more of a shooting heavy army, which might be fun for me, but not for my opponent. But we'll see. The goblins for now are done. This is as far as they'll go for probably the next few months. I'm working on Trident Realms right now, and then Riftforge Orcs for the new National Australian Mantic Army Challenge, which Matt Croger is organising. So I would want to go heavy into Riftforge Orcs, and that will be fun because they look completely different, and I'll do a completely different basing scheme for those. The Trident Realms is kind of just a second-hand army that's getting new units attached to it, so I'm just trying to match that basing scheme, which really is just water and rocks. So that's not that exciting, not like the goblins. I really enjoy basing the goblins, and so that's why I will come back. I do have them in some mobs, and so eventually I'll make all the various adjustments. But that's the goblin army, and so I hope you like seeing the whole army in one piece and facing us rather than in the battle reports where it's facing away from me and you don't really get to see the models. So I hope you appreciate them. I enjoyed making them, and yeah, this was all pretty much speed paints and contrast paints to put it all together. Very rarely was I doing lots and lots of layers. I think only when I just couldn't quite get the color I wanted. Like here, that jade. That was some nice jade crystal, but geez, it took a while to get it to that nice look. So yeah, comment down below, let me know if there's anything else I can add to this goblin army that will make it absolutely terrifying to face, and how you might be playing your goblin armies, because I'm keen to know how others play. I know a lot of, Mincer mobs are a must, but perhaps you get use out of other kinds of unit types or configurations. And so I'm keen to hear. Maybe you have a better use for individuals. Maybe you think wizards are great and you have 3 of them in every army. Just let me know. And also, yes, should I get more Luggits? Should I go for that Logger Horde? Or is that Luggit Horde just a trap? I don't know. I haven't used it, but we'll see. Alright, thanks, and like and subscribe if you like the video or in general, and I'll see you in the next video. Hope you're having a good holidays.